Well, shooters and reloaders out there, Fortune Cookie 45 LC coming to you from the hot lead zone. And my previous video on Hornady reloading brass, the good, the bad, and the ugly, has caused a lot of comments because the whole idea behind that video was that Hornady has shortened their revolver brass to make the FTX ammo work. And there's been a lot of comments about why that had to be done, because Hornady said that it was required to shorten the brass. Well, let's go ahead and examine what the argument is, because does that argument hold water? Based on what we know about loading bullets, crimping bullets, this kind of thing, was it necessary for Hornady to shorten the brass and make it hard on reloaders? Now, first of all, this ammo, this factory ammo here, is very good ammo. If you have some of this, you've got good ammo. No argument about that. So a lot of you are fans out there of the FTX ammo, the Lever Revolution ammo. Well, you should be fans of it because it's good ammo. I have some myself. However, reloaders suffer because we have to deal with short brass if we want to reload these cases. Either that or we separate them out and then we use them for reloading FTX again or this kind of thing. But was that all necessary? That's the idea behind this video, a follow-up to Hornady reloading brass, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what is the argument? So what Hornady said was, we want to give you a high ballistic coefficient bullet for your lever guns, so you got more range. Well, in order to do that, this point cannot be too close to the shank of the bullet, because the closer you get to the shank of the bullet, it becomes a wad cutter, and that's the worst ballistic coefficient shape there is. So you got to take that point and push it out farther, enough to get a Spitzer shape at the ballistic coefficient you're trying to get. That makes sense to do this. Well, Hornady did that. They went ahead and pushed it out to a certain amount, and then they found out then, in order to load that point had to be a certain relation to the cartridge case, because it can't stick out too far. It won't feed in lever guns. So you have it at a certain position to feed in lever guns, but then the problem is the case is over the ogive of the bullet. That you need the ballistic coefficient to have that ogive a certain way. So they're saying the ogive forces them to shorten the case, so they take the case and they shorten it to here, so that then the case becomes there on the shank, and then they can put a cantilever there and crimp the bullet into the cantilever, and that results in a shorter case, but then they can go ahead and have the proper length and the ballistic coefficient shape of the bullet, and that solves the problem, right? As if they had to do that. That's the argument that we're being presented, is that that is required in order to get this to work. And my point is, no, it wasn't required. Let's examine that. So here's what Hornady wound up with. The case is crimped right there in the cantilever on the shank of their FTX bullet. But if they had left that case full length, why couldn't they just crimp it over the shank and the nose junction and just crimp it over that junction? And then, if necessary, they could have put a roll cantilever crimp into the case here to prevent any bullet setback. This would allow the FTX to work because you're maintaining the same point position, but the case is still left out at maximum length, and then it's just crimped over the nose. So in the case of the 45 Colt, you'll notice that here is the shortened case to this point. But had Hornady left the case the proper length, they just crimp it over this little nose shank junction right here. So they would just go ahead and crimp it right there over this nose. And that would have left the case full length. There's plenty of room right there to crimp it over the nose and have no problem doing that. Now, if you examine a full length 45 Colt round as opposed to the shortened Hornady 45 Colt brass, notice that if you left it full length, that you could easily make a conservative crimp over the junction of the shank to the nose of the bullet and just crimp right over the nose right there. And then, if you're concerned about the bullet setback problems because the crimp can only go one way if you're going over the nose, well then put in a cantilever crimp like this. No setback, no forward shifting of the bullet, good neck tension. The guns are already set up for this length round, so there's no reason why this couldn't have been done. Now in the case of the 44 Magnum, if you examine the shorter Hornady brass casing here, there's actually a cantilever there, and there's actually a little bit of shank on the bullet. The cantilever could easily have been extended forward a little bit, and then the case left full length and easily crimpable right there, not a problem. So again, why was the 44 Magnum brass necessary to be shortened? So in the case of the 357 Magnum, if you listen to what Hornady is saying, is that the profile of this bullet requires the case to be shortened. But yet, if you examine this closely, you'll see the shank of the bullet is way up here. And if it's way up there, the cantilever had plenty of space to be put farther forward, and then the cartridge case didn't have to be shortened. So again, why was it shortened? There's no problem with this one just being normally crimped on the shank that's farther forward. Absolutely no reason to shorten these cases by the amount that they did. And you can see how much they shortened that. Do you see where the shank is? The shank and the nose meet right there. There's plenty of room. This is just glaring. Plus again, you can see the use of a cantilever crimp on the case body where the bullet is. Very effective in holding a bullet where it needs to be held. Nothing wrong with doing that in case you're concerned about bullet setback. Now, if anybody thinks it's taboo to crimp a cartridge case over the nose of a bullet, then you've been sold a bill of goods, because crimping over the shank of a bullet onto the nose or the ogive of a bullet is commonly done, was commonly done. Look at this drawing of the 357 Magnum taken out of the Lyman reloading manual, and you'll see that there's a semi-wad cutter where the case mouth is crimped over the front of the semi-wad cutter. That happens to be where the shank ends and the nose of the bullet begins. Nothing wrong with crimping over the shank of a bullet, or even onto the nose of a bullet. Let's take another example of that. Now take our current Lee 358 200 grain long heavy bullet for the 38 Special 357 Magnum. This bullet approaches the idea of maintaining velocity at longer range, not with ballistic coefficient, but with sectional density. And the long bullet's got a long nose. So sure, you can load it in 38 Special cases, but what happens when you put it into a 357 Magnum case? Are you gonna go ahead and say, okay, we've got to keep the nose right here to function in lever guns and also fit into revolver cylinders, but then the case is too long because we're on the nose, so we're going to shorten it and wind up with a 38 Special? No, what we do is we go ahead and crimp over the point where the shank meets the nose of the bullet, where the ogive starts. We can crimp right over the front driving band there, or we can actually crimp over this part of the nose that still has close proximity to the width of the shank. So we go ahead and crimp there, and it crimps beautifully. So one thing I know, and that is I like the factory ammo, but I don't like the empty brass casings to reload with. And it's too bad that I've got to spend premium ammo prices and I can't use the brass to reload. And it didn't have to be. So you know that in the hot lead zone, we like to present information that you don't hear on other YouTube videos. Well, what we're doing here is presenting this information to you and letting you, the viewer, decide for yourself whether there's anything to the arguments that being made by Hornady that says they had to shorten the cases. And if you think that they had to, well then that they had to. Or if you look at what's presented here and then you question that based on what you know.